नमस्कारं
ओम
राजेश।
नमस्कार मते श्रीकृष्ण शरणं मम गोपिका जीवन स्मरणं गोविंदा गोविंदा सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। शुक्लां भरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। नमो नमः सद्गुरुभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो नमः सद्गुरुभ्यो नमो नमः। सच्चिदानन्दरूपाय विश्वोत्पत्त्यादिहेतवे तापत्रयविनाशाय श्रीकृष्णाय वयं नुमः। यं प्रव्रजन्तमनुपेतम् अपेतकृत्यं द्वैपायनो विरह कातर आजुहाव पुत्रेति तन्मयतया तरवोऽभिनेदुः तं सर्वभूतहृदयं मुनिमानतोऽस्मि। यस्वानुभावमखिल श्रुतिसारमेकम् अध्यात्मदीपम् अतितितीर्षतां तमोन्धं संसारिणां करुणयाः पुराणगुह्यं तं व्याससूनुमुपयामि गुरुं मुनीनां। योगीन्द्राय नमस्तस्मै शुकाय ब्रह्मरूपिणे संसारसर्पदष्टं यो विष्णुरातम् अमुमुचत कालव्यालमुखग्रास त्रासनिर्नाशहेतवे श्रीमद्भागवतं शास्त्रं कलोकीरेण भाषितम् एतस्मादपरं किञ्चित् मनःशुद्ध्येन विद्यते जन्मान्तरे भवेत् पुण्यं तदा भागवतं लभेत् ज्ञानवैराग्यसम्पूर्णान् हरिभक्तिपरायणान् पूर्वाचार्यातहं वन्दे सम्प्रदायप्रवर्तकान् भगवन्नाम साम्राज्य लक्ष्मी सर्वस्वविग्रहं श्रीमद्बोधेन्द्र योगीन्द्र देशिकेन्द्रम् उपास्महे। कलिकालोचितं धर्मं नाम संकीर्तनात्मकं निर्णेतुम् अवतीर्णं तं प्रेमिकं सद्गुरुं भजे। हरे रामेति कृष्णेति नाम संकीर्तनं सदा लोकक्षेमाय कुर्वन्तं प्रेमिकं सद्गुरुं भजे। जन्माद्यस्य यतोऽन्वयात् इतरतश्चार्थेष्वभिज्ञस्वराट् तेने ब्रह्महृदाय आदिकवये मुह्यन्ति यत्सूरयः तेजो वारिमृदां यथा विनिमयो यत्र त्रिसर्गो मृषा धाम्ना स्वेन सदा निरस्तकुहकं सत्यं परं धीमहि धर्मप्रोज्झितकैतवोऽत्र परमो
निर्मल निर्मल
निर्मत्सराणां सतां वेद्यं वास्तवमत्र वस्तु शिवदं तापत्रयोन्मूलनम् श्रीमद्भागवते महामुनिकृते किं वा परैरीश्वरः सद्यो हृद्य वरुध्यतेऽत्र कृतिभिः शुश्रूषिभिस्तत्क्षणात् निगमकल्पतरोर्गलितं फलं शुकमुखात् अमृतद्रवसंयुतं पिबत भागवतं रसमालयं मुहुरहो रसिका भुवि भावुकाः नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। श्रीमद्भागवताख्योऽयं प्रत्यक्षः कृष्ण एव हि स्वीकृतोऽसि मया नाथ मुख्यर्थं भवसागरे मनोरथो मदीयोऽयं सफलः सर्वदा त्वया निर्विघ्नेनैव कर्तव्यो दासोऽहं तव केशव। श्रीहरये नमः श्रीहरये नमः श्रीहरये नमः। गोपिका जीवन स्मरणं गोविंदा गोविंदा सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Okay, so we'll do the review of 24. I know almost half the class probably is not going to show up today for multiple reasons, but so Ananji, maybe you can do one half, and Amuchichi, you can do one half of 24. You can do 1 to 24, Ananji, and Amuchichi can do the rest.
चतुर्विंशोऽध्यायः मैत्रेय उवाच निर्वेदवादिनीमेवं मनोर्दुहितरं मुनिः दयालुशालिनीमाह शुक्लाभिव्याहृतं स्मरन् ऋषिरुवाच माघितो राजपुत्रीधम् आत्मानं प्रत्यनिन्दिते भगवांस्तेक्षरो गर्भम् अदूरात् सम्प्रपत्स्यते धृतवा व्रातासि भद्रं ते दमेन नियमेन च तपोद्रवीणादानेश्च श्रद्धया चेश्वरं भज सत्त्वयाराधिता शुक्लो विदन्नन्मामकं यशः चेताते हृदयग्रन्थिम् औदार्यो ब्रह्मभावना मैत्रेय उवाच
भावनः
औदार्यो ब्रह्मभावनः मैत्रेय उवाच देवहूत्याभिसन्देशं गौरवेण प्रजापतेः सम्यक् श्रद्धाय पुरुषं कूढस्थामभजद्गुरुं तस्यां बहुदिते काले भगवान् मधुसूदनः कार्दमं वीर्यमापन्नो यज्ञग्नेरिव दारुणी अवादयं सदा व्योम्नि वादित्राणि घनाघनाः गायन्ति तं स्म गन्धर्वाः नत्यन्ताप्सरसो मुदा पेदुस्व मनसो दिव्याः गेजरेरपवर्जिताः प्रसेदुश्च दिशः सर्वाः अम्बासि च मनांसि च तत्कर्धमाश्रमपदं सरस्वत्या परिसृतं स्वयंभूः सागमऋषिभिः मरीच्यादिभिरभ्ययाद् भगवन्तं परं ब्रह्म सत्येनांशेन शत्रुघ्न विज्ञप्ते जातं विद्वानजस्वराड् सवाजेन विशुद्धेन चेतसा तच्चिकीर्षितं प्रहर्ष्यमाणैरसुभिः कर्दमं चेदमभ्यदात् ब्रह्म उवाच त्वया मे पचिदिस्ताद कल्पिदात् निर्वलीकतः यन्मे सञ्जगृहे वाक्यं भवान् मानदमानयन् एतावदेव शुश्रूषा कार्या पितरिपुत्रकैः भाडमित्यानुमन्येत गौरवेण गुरोर्वचः इमा दुहितरः सभ्य तव वल्सस्सु मध्यमाः सर्गमेदं प्रभावैषैः ब्रह्मयिष्यन्त्यनेकता अतस्तं ऋषिं मुख्योभ्यो यदा शीलं यदा रुचि आत्मजा परिदेह्यद्य विस्त्राणिः यशो भुवि विस्त्रीणीः यशो भुवि थैंक यू राजेश वेदाहमाद्यं पुरुषम् अवतीर्णं समायया भूतानां शेवदिं देहं बिभ्राणं कपिलं मुनि ज्ञानविज्ञानयोगेन कर्मणा मुद्धरन् जडाः हिरण्यकेशपद्माक्षः पद्ममुद्रापदाम्बुजः एष मानविते गर्भं प्रविष्टः कैडवार्दनः अविद्या संशयग्रन्थिं छित्त्वा गां विचिरिक्षति अयं सिद्धगणाधीशः साङ्ख्याचार्येषु सम्मतः लोके कपिल इत्याख्यां गन्धाते कीर्तिवर्धनः मैत्रेय उवाच तावाशास्य जगत्सृष्टा कुमारी सहस्नारदः हंसो हंसेन यानेन त्रिधामः परमं ययो गदेशतधृतोषत्तः कर्दमस्तेन चोदितः योदितं
यथोदितं first second line first word
यथोदितं स्वदुह्यत्रुः प्रादात् विश्वस्रजां ततः मरीचये कलां प्रादात् अनसूयामदत्रये श्रद्धामङ्गिरसे यच्छत् पुलस्त्याय हविर्भुवं पुलहाय गतिं युक्तां क्रतवे च क्रियां सतीं ख्यातीं च भृगवे यच्छत् वसिष्ठाय पेरुन्दतीम् अदर्वेणा ददाच्छन्तीं यया यज्ञो विदन्यते विवृषभान् कृतोद्दोहान् सदारान् समलालयत्.
You can stop there. You can stop there. That first line, this first part, Atharvane dadachantim.
Atharvane dadachantim.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Rajesh, or question ke lama number 15 la second line la, is it vistru or vistru?
Just one r under vistru nihi.
Okay, thank you.
तदस्तरिषयः क्षत्तः कृददारानि मन्यतं स्वादिष्टन्यन्तिमापन्नाः त्वं समाश्रममण्डलं चावतीर्णं त्रियुगम् आज्ञाय विबुधर्षभं विविक्त उपसङ्गम्य प्रणम्य समभाषत महोपाबच्यमानानां निरये स्वैरमङ्गलैः कालेन भूयसा नूनं प्रसीदन्तीह देवताः बहुजन्म विपक्वेन सम्यग् योगसमाधिना द्रष्टुं यदन्ते यतयः शून्यागारेषु यत्पदम् एव भगवानद्य तुलनं न गणय्यनः गृहेषु जादो ग्राम्याणां यस्वानां पक्षपोषणः प्रियं वाक्यमृदं कर्तुम् अवतीर्णोऽसि मे गृहे विगिर्षुर्भगवान् ज्ञानं भक्तानां मानवर्धनः तान्येव तेभिरूपाणि रूपाणि भगवंस्तव यानि यानि च रोचन्ते स्वजनानामरूपिणः त्वां सूर्यभिस्तत्त्वबुभुत्सयाद्धा तदाभिवादार्पणपादपीठम् ऐश्वर्यवैराग्ययशोवबोधवीर्यश्रिया पूर्तमहं प्रपद्ये परं प्रधानं पुरुषं महान्तं कालं कविं त्रिवृतं लोकपालम् आत्मानुभूत्यानुगतः प्रपञ्चं प्रच्छन्दशक्तिं कपिलं प्रपद्ये अस्माभिपृच्छेद्य पदिं प्रजानां त्वयावतीर्णार्न उदप्तकामः परिव्रजत्पदवीमास्तिदोऽहं करिष्ये त्वां हृदि युञ्जन् विशोकः श्रीभगवानुवाच मया प्रोक्तं हि लोकस्य प्रमाणं सत्यलौकिके अथाजनि मया तुभ्यं यदवोजमृतं मुने एतन्मे जन्मलोकेऽस्मिन् मुमुक्षूणां दुराशयात् प्रसङ्ख्यानाय तत्त्वानां सम्मतायात्मदर्शने एष आत्मपदो व्यक्तो हस्तः कालेन भूयसा सम्प्रवर्तयितुं देहम् इमं विद्धि मया भृतम् यच्च कामं मया पृष्टो मयि संन्यस्य कर्मणा जित्वा सुदुर्जयं मृत्युम् अमृतत्वाय मां भज मामात्मानं स्वयं ज्योतिः सर्वभूतगुहाशयम् आत्मन्येवात्मना वीक्ष्य विशोगो भयमृच्छसि मात्र आध्यात्मिकीं विद्यां समनीं सर्वकर्मणां विदरिष्ये यया चासौ स्वयं चादितरिष्यति मैत्रेय उवाच एवं समुदितस्तेन कपिलेन प्रजापतिः दक्षिणीकृत्य तं प्रीतो वनमेव जगामः रदं स आस्थितो मौनम् आत्मैकशरणो मुनिः निस्सङ्को व्यजरक्षोणिम् अनिकेतनः मनोब्रह्मणि युञ्चानो यत्तत् सदसदः परम् गुणावभासे विगुणे वेगभक्त्यानुभाविते निरहङ्कृतिर्निर्ममश्च निर्द्वन्द्वः समदृक् प्रत्यक्प्रशान्तधीर्धीरः प्रशान्तोर्मिरिवोधभिः वासुदेवे भगवति सर्वज्ञे प्रत्यगात्मनि परेण भक्तिभावेन लब्धात्मा मुक्तबन्धनः आत्मानं सर्वभूतेषु भगवन्तमवस्थितम् अपश्यत् सर्वभूतानि भगवत्यपि चात्मनि इच्छाद्वेषविहीनेन सर्वत्र समचेतसा भगवद्भक्तियुक्तेन प्राप्ता भागवती गतिः इति श्रीमद्भागवते महापुराणे पारमहंस्यां संहितायां तृतीयस्कन्धे पापिलेये चतुर्विंशोऽध्यायः। हरये नमो श्रीहरये गोपिका जीवन शरणं गोविंदा गोविंदा सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय।
Okay, we'll go to 25. Ata Panchavimshodhyayah. So this is kind of the beginning of the conversation that's going to happen between Kapila and Devahuti, right? So I'll give some context when we get a little bit into it. So I'm going to break this into two parts because from now on, the next 8 weeks is going to be heavily philosophical and heavily loaded chapters because that's what it is, right? So it gets into too much detail. So we'll split it in the meaning in 2 halves. So anyway, so it starts off again, always reminding us that the conversation is happening between Suta Pauranika and the Shaunaka and all the rishis, where Suta Pauranika is addressing the sages, telling what he heard when Shuka Brahman was telling Parikshit about the conversation that Maitreya and Vidura are having, right? Those are the 3 nested loops, right? So that's again, they remind us again by Shaunaka Vacha. Shaunaka is starting that conversation again, right? Is saying that, yes, Bhagavan has taken incarnation as Kapila, and it's taken, but this is his choice. He could have taken incarnation as anything, but he has decided to take into that form primarily for the purpose of Atma Pragnaptaye, first time, so to teach the process of self-realization, right? That's what he has done. And he said the reason he did that Because there's no who else knows about knowledge more than Bhagavan. Nobody else knows more than Bhagavan. So sometimes when the knowledge is lost, the best person to come and reset that knowledge is Bhagavan himself. That's why Krishna also during Mahabharata time in Dwapara, he came and reset the knowledge by teaching Bhagavad Gita, because he's the best person to reset that knowledge, right? Because he's the master of all the Vedas, he knows everything. So he says, so naturally, I want to hear more about Kapila, which is an incarnation, and also want to hear more about the knowledge that Kapila has taught. That's what Shaunaka is reminding, and Sutta Pauranika says, sure. This is what Shukra Brahmam also told Parikshit about the conversation. So the conversation is now continuing between Maitreya and Vidura. So the last chapter we saw where Kardama decides he's getting liberated and leaves for the forest. He says, I'm renouncing everything because Kapila is born. So he's your responsibility, Devahuti, and he will now take care of making sure Devahuti is getting liberated. So Kapila now leaves. So now Kapila and Devahuti are there on the banks of Bindu Sarovar, on the banks of Saraswati. So at that time, Devahuti then approaches him, because she goes and tells him, because she remembers what Brahma told her in the previous chapter, saying that Supreme Lord is going to be born to you, right? And he is the one who's going to be an expert. He's going to be known as Kapila. He's going to teach you the knowledge of self-realization, and we'll come to what is the meaning of self-realization later. He's going to give you that knowledge, and he's an expert. And so Brahma has already said that. So now Devahuti remembers that. And then she asks one basic question first. She says that, the senses that we have, right? We think of all the senses, the eyes, ears, nose, or skin, and everything, the 5 senses, and then the main thing, mind, which we'll come to. He says these senses are all temporary, because the moment we die, this thing goes off, right? So this is there because we have this body right now. She says these material senses are getting attached to all the material things. We like what we see, we like what we eat, we like what we smell. She says it's getting attached to all these things, because of which my mind is getting disturbed a lot, right? And because my mind is getting disturbed, she says, I'm falling into tamas, I'm falling into ignorance, and I'm falling into andasya, I'm falling into darkness, because my mind is getting confused, because all these senses are constantly getting attached to everything. So she says, you have to help me figure out a way to get out of all of these things, right? Because you are Kapila, with you, I can get all this information. You are the best person to do this, right? So she says, so now the other thing she says is that the gain always comes back to always one root cause, right? Of saying, when Brahma began the creation, he created the first 5 ajnana vritti we spoke about, 5 kinds of designs which he creates. The first one we said was tamas, which is ignorance. So ignorance of not knowing who we are. That's the first step. We truly don't know who we are. We all think this is me, right? So that's the first one, which step is ignorance. The second one, which said was moham, which is illusion, where I don't know who I am. So I think I am this body. That's an illusion I am living under. Because I think I am this body, then the next step was Mahamoham, where everything connected to me becomes my possession. That is the third stuff we saw. And the fourth thing was, if any of my possessions get disturbed, something happens to my house, something happens to my family, something happens to my body, then I'm getting worried, I'm getting disturbed, right? And then the extreme sense of it is what we think is death, which is actually not an end, but a continuation. But all these 5 things, right? Which is what, again, Devahuti says, I'm very ignorant. I'm getting stuck into this ignorance because I'm not able to understand any of these things, right? Because of which my mind is actually getting disturbed. So he says, you are the only one. And she asks a couple of other questions, which we all ask all the time. So, we always ask, who am I really? What we all ask that, who am I? You say we are a soul, you say I'm a body. Who am I in reality? Why am I even born? Why did I take this birth? Why did I take birth in this body? Why am I feeling happy sometimes? Why am I feeling sorrow sometimes? And you're saying I'm getting stuck in this material world. Why am I even stuck in this material world? Right? And if I am stuck in this material world, how do I get out of this? So these are all questions we ask every single time. That's exactly the questions Devahuti is asking Kapila, saying that I need to understand the self-realization, where I need to truly understand what all this stuff is. Because you keep saying I'm ignorant, this is all because of ignorance. But what is the true thing? What is the true spirit which is actually there? You keep saying, Prakriti, what is the true material matter that is there? How is all this getting connected? How do I come out of this, right? So natural questions that we all are, she's asking the same thing as well. So this questions that Devahuti is asking is what Kapila Muni is going to explain in 360 stanzas over 8 chapters, right? He's going to explain this thing, which Bhattatripada explained in 9 stanzas in Dashakam 15. Because the last stanza, he said Bhakti is the only option, and he wrapped up that stanza, that Dashakam. So in 9 stanzas, he explained it, but Kapila is going to explain it in 360 stanzas in extreme detail, right? Now, before we get into the details of what Kapila, and he's going to talk about in each chapter is going to be something different. Now, before we get into it, the most important thing is to say that we may not completely get it. And by we, I'm including me also. We may not completely get it, because the moment you truly get it, not just by explaining it, and if you can truly feel it, you are actually liberated. The fact that we are all on the Zoom call, and we probably will be on the Zoom call 8 weeks from now, means that we are not yet liberated, which means we truly haven't understood it and felt it, right? So there's long way to go. So the way we have to think about this whole journey of 8 chapters is to say, am I knowing more than what I knew last week? If you're knowing more than what you know last week, we are making progress, right? So that is how we have to think about these things, because it's going to be very complicated, right? It may be easy for me to say it, but it's going to be very difficult for us to really absorb it and feel it, right? So anyway, so with this, Bhagavanu Vacha, so Kapila then starts first talking about the glory of bhakti. So, but she asked about soul, she asked about how am I connected, why am I born, and everything, right? But Kapila, before he answers all of that stuff, he says, ignore all the details, right? If I have to give you a key takeaway or an executive summary, which is what Kapila is first doing, he says, even if you do not understand anything I'm going to say later, know that bhakti is extremely important. So I'll tell you what the glory of bhakti is. So that's how he first starts with it, right? Is to say the first thing is to understand the importance of bhakti, right? So he says that he first starts off by saying that everyone in this world is there to get some level of material happiness. Everybody, there's no doubt about it. And we all want some kind of material happiness that we have. So, because otherwise we would not be in this world right now. Now, anytime there's a material happiness which is there, he says distress or sorrow is bound to follow. There's no doubt about it. Because when there is any material object, you get attached to an object which gives you happiness, you feel happy. That object is not permanent, which means anytime that object gets taken away, you're going to feel sorrow, right? You're going to feel distress about it. So he says this path of yoga that Kapila is going to tell, he says, it is not to say, how can I be happy all the time? He says that's a wrong question, because you can never be happy all the time. The moment you're happy with something, sorrow is bound to come next. Because I remove that object, you're going to feel sorrow. So the question is not how to be happy all the time. The question is how to be detached from happiness and sorrow all the time. Yes, that is the right question, right? Because that is extremely important, because it is impossible for somebody to be always attached to something and be happy all the time. That is never going to happen. There's an exception, right? Which is going to explain in terms of bhakti, but I'm talking about material things, right? So he says, I'm going to teach you about this. And then he first starts about understanding what liberation means, right? So he says, we all think that attaching our senses to something is what gives us happiness, right? So if I'm eating something, we were at an Arangetram yesterday, they gave a halwa. Okay, we liked it. My senses, my taste buds liked it. So I'm getting attached to it. So I like it. So we think it is our taste buds. You smell something good. You think, oh, my nose is liking it. So it's my nose's problem. It's my senses' problem, right? But he says, no, it is not the senses' problem. He says the senses are more like they don't have an independent freedom of their own. The mouth is, the taste is not going to go look out for something. He says, don't blame your 5 senses. He says you have to blame your mind, which is your mind is the primary responsibility. Because I could sit here right now, imagine some dish I like, then I will feel like I want to eat the dish and feel happy about it. I'm seeing a YouTube reel about something. I could get attached to it. I may want to eat it. Now I don't have access to it, so I'm going to feel sad. So even without tasting a dish, even without touching something, I can imagine everything in my mind and I can get happy or sad. So he says the issue is not with the five senses, because the five senses cannot go on their own and do it. The issue is with your mind. So he says that is the only thing you have to control, not your five senses. So he says, don't worry about your five senses. He says the mind is the conditioned one which controls all the five senses also. Right? And so he says that is so he says that the other senses are like demigods. He says, the mind is like the supreme lord. Just like how the supreme lord can control all the demigods, your mind should be able to control all of those things. Now, when your mind along with your senses are focused in one direction, which is towards bhakti, instead of all these material things, then that is the one which is going to lead to liberation. Because he says that at the end of the day, you as a human, you're going to be bound to attach to something. It's like saying energy can never be created nor destroyed. It simply says attachment can never be removed. You always have to get attached to something. But he says, instead of getting attached to all these material things, if you get attached to Bhagavan instead, because that comes naturally to you, right? Then he says that is one path which is actually going to lead to liberation, right? So that is what he says. He first says that is primarily it is your mind that you have to kind of control here, right? The next he says, is like we spoke about is everything we say is, what do you call, is mine. We all love us. Everything belongs to us and all of that stuff, right? So he says, because of this, because of the possessiveness, we get two things. One of them is we get kama, we get desire to stuff. And second, we get greed because we want more, right? No matter how much we get, we feel like we want one step more, right? So he says all of that stuff again goes to the root cause of you thinking it is me, my body needs this, and all of that stuff, right? So that again, he keeps coming back to the concept of us identifying with the body. And the separation of me versus the body is going to come only later when he talks about the Sankhya philosophy of how to not do that. But he says the primary cause of all of this is that, and he says the moment you come above all of these things, he says the soul truly sees that I am not this, and I'm not this body, I've just incarnated, and the soul is truly a witness to what is happening. Right? Because the people, when you see people who are truly liberated, they don't go and say, I want something or I don't want something. They don't care about it, right? Because that is the fundamental aspect, and all of that comes to how you're controlling your mind or your intellect in terms of not wanting it. And he says, in this case, this is nothing called as, like for any person who, and this another very important thing, coming before Sankhya philosophy is, he says you cannot attain self-realization if you do not have bhakti. So he says if you're just going on the knowledge path of saying, I'm going to get all the knowledge I want, the knowledge is important, right? And I'll give you one example of why the knowledge is also important, but it is also irrelevant. So if you think of, and I was just thinking through how to explain this, right? So if you think of a small child who's there, any small baby, a 2-year-old baby, then you have another, maybe a youth, and then you have, let's say, me, and then you have a doctor. Okay, all four of us have the same cold right now, and all of us have the exact same symptoms. We give the same medicine to all four of them. The child doesn't even know what is happening. It's just opening its mouth, you pump the medicine into the child. A 10-year-old boy is going to protest, saying that I don't want to take the medicine, I don't know how the medicine is going to help me, but you still give him the medicine. I, 47 years, I know this medicine is going to cure me, but I don't know how the medicine works. But I'm going to take the medicine because I know it has worked in the past. The doctor knows exactly how the medicine is going to work. In all these four cases, assuming all conditions are the same, the medicine is going to cure the problem, the fever or whatever is it. Your knowledge of how the medicine does it is different for these four categories of people. However, knowing that the medicine is going to help and knowing how it helps will make you process, it will make you want to take it. While a 10-year-old boy may refuse to take it. That is very simply the difference between Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. He says Bhakti is going to lead you to liberation. You don't need Jnanam. However, the more Jnanam you have, you will be able to better realize the importance of this thing, and then you'll be able to absorb it better, just like how the doctor knows how the medicine works. So he has the knowledge, but he still has to take the medicine. The medicine here is the bhakti. right? So that is a subtle difference that he's very clearly articulating there, saying that the path of self-realization, of understanding all of these things, still is encapsulated by this bhakti. You still need to have the bhakti, and it cannot be removed. Right? That's the main first half of this, the first 20 stanzas. And Bhattatripad explained it in Dashakam 15, first stanza, very nicely, where he said, Matiriha guna sakta, bhanda kriteshva sakta do, amrita kridu parunde, bhakti yogastu saktim, mahadanu gamalapya, bhakti revatra sadhya. This is the only way is to go through the path of devotion to control, and that too how, which is what Kapila is saying here, is association with devotees who are self-realized, right? Because how else will you get bhakti out of the blue, right? See, he says the best way to get bhakti, he says you have to associate yourself with sadhus or people who are self-realized. And then he goes on to describe what a self-realized person is. He says a self-realized person, this is in stanza 21 and so on, he'll describe that a self-realized person is one who's a true devotee of the Lord, which means one who's not doing something because he or she is expecting something in return. They truly are devoted to the Lord. One. Two, they're out there, their primary, lot of this rishis and everybody, the whole purpose of writing all, why did Bhattacharya write everything? Why did people write all these things? Is because they want to help others. They want to make sure others are also getting liberated. And then number three is the basic things. They're tolerant to everybody. They are very merciful. They don't have any enemies. They are peaceful, right? The common characteristics that we associate with a person. And they're always devoted, right? There's no question of I'm devoted on these conditions, I'm not devoted on these conditions, and all of this stuff. And says such people who are true devotees of the Lord, association with them is the best way, right? Because when you're with them, and he says, your mind, remember we said the mind is always traveling all over the place, right? Your attachment, you're always looking for something to get attached to. If you cannot control your mind, he says, just be with a self-realized person. Because what happens with if a self-realized or a devoted person, they're always talking about Bhagavan. They're talking about the names. They're talking about the stories. They're talking about the glories, which means your empty, idle mind, instead of running everywhere else, is constantly going to be focused on it. He says you force it that way. By forcing it that way, it is not going to get deviated, right? So that is pretty much the first half of this, where he talks about the importance of bhakti, the benefits of it, because he says even if you cannot control your mind, don't try to control your mind. It's impossible. Give mind something to work on, and that thing you get to work on is do devotion or be with devoted people. By doing that, your mind is going to get attached to that stuff, and then you don't have to worry about controlling your mind, because controlling your mind is going to be impossible. It's just going to wander all over the place, right? So anyway, that is the first kind of half of or something like this, right, of this chapter. Okay, so let me see who. I think we don't have a lot of people today, but okay, Uma, Sabita, you both can be students. Let me see what 234. Okay. अत पंचविंशोऽध्यायः शौनक उवाच कपिलस्तत्त्वसङ्ख्याता भगवान् आत्ममायया जातस् स्वयमजस् साक्षात्, so the I'm breaking, साक्षात्, आत्म प्रज्ञप्तये नृणाम्. शौनक उवाच कपिलस्तत्त्वसङ्ख्याता भगवान् आत्ममायया जातः स्वयमजः साक्षात् आत्मप्रज्ञप्तये नृणाम्.
शौनक उवाच कपिलस्तत्त्वसङ्ख्याता भगवान् आत्ममायया जातः स्वयमजः साक्षात् आत्मप्रज्ञप्तये नृणाम्.
शौनक उवाच कपिलस्तत्त्वसङ्ख्याता भगवान् आत्ममायया जातः स्वयमजः साक्षात् आत्मप्रज्ञप्तये नृणाम्.
न ह्यस्य वर्ष्मणः पुंसां वरिम्नः सर्वयोगिनां विश्रुतौ श्रुतदेवस्य भूरि तृप्यन्ति मेषवः. न ह्यस्य वर्ष्मणः पुंसां वरिम्नः सर्वयोगिनां विश्रुतौ श्रुतदेवस्य भूरि तृप्यन्ति मेषवः.
न ह्यस्य वर्ष्मणः पुंसां वरिं नः सर्वयोगिनां विश्रुतौ श्रुतदेवस्य भूरि तृप्यन्ति मे सवः
न ह्यस्य वश्मनः पुंसां वरिं नः सर्वयोगिनां विश्रुतौ श्रुतदेवस्य भूरि तृप्यन्ति मे सवः
यद्यत् विधत्ते भगवान् कॉमा स्वच्छन्दात्मात्म, so it's one word, swachanda atma, double atma there, so swachhandatmatma mayaya tani me shraddha dhanasya comma kirtanyanyanu kirtaya, it's also one long word. यद्यद् विधत्ते भगवान् स्वच्छन्दात्मात्ममायया तानि मे श्रद्दधानस्य कीर्तन्यान्यनुकीर्तय।
यद्यद्विधत्ते भगवान् स्वच्छन्दात्मात्ममायया तानि मे श्रद्धधानस्य कीर्तन्यान्यनुकीर्तये
यद्यद्विधत्ते भगवान् स्वच्छन्दात्मात्ममायया तानि मे श्रद्धधानस्य कीर्तन्यान्यनुकीर्तय।
सूत उवाच द्वैपायनः सखस्त्वेवं मैत्रेयो भगवांस्तथा प्राहेदं विदुरं प्रीतः, so add a visarga there because we're going to put a comma, प्रीतः आन्वीक्षिक्यां प्रचोदितः। सूत उवाच द्वैपायनः सखस्त्वेवं मैत्रेयो भगवांस्तथा प्राहेदं विदुरं प्रीतः आन्वीक्षिक्यां प्रचोदितः।
सूत उवाच द्वैपायनसखस्त्वेवं मैत्रेयो भगवांस्तथा प्राहेदं विदुरं प्रीतः आन्वीक्षिक्यां प्रचोदितः।
सूत उवाच द्वैपायनसखस्त्वेवं मैत्रेयो भगवांस्तथा प्राहेदं विदुरं प्रीतः आन्वीक्षिक्यां प्रचोदितः।
मैत्रेयो उवाच पितरि प्रस्थितेरन्यं मातुः प्रिय चिकीर्षया तस्मिन् बिन्दुसरेवात्सीत्, so that the and verb you're going to break it, vatsit it भगवान् कपिलः किल। मैत्रेयो उवाच पितरि प्रस्थितेरन्यं मातुः प्रियचिकीर्षया तस्मिन् बिन्दुसरेवात्सीत् भगवान् कपिलः किल।
मैत्रेय उवाच पितरिप्रस्थितेरन्यं मातुः प्रियचिकीर्षया तस्मिन् बिन्दुसरेवात्सीत् भगवान् कपिलः किल।
मैत्रेय उवाच पितरिप्रस्थितेरण्यं मातुः प्रियचिकीर्षया तस्मिन् बिन्दुसरेवात्सीत् भगवान् कपिलः किल।
तमासीनम् अकर्माणं, breaking at that ma if you want, अकर्माणं तत्व मार्गाग्र दर्शनं स्वसुतं देवहूत्याः धातुस् संस्मरति वचः। तमासीनमकर्माणं तत्त्वमार्गाग्रदर्शनं स्वसुतं देवहूत्याः धातुः संस्मरति वचः।
तमासीनम् अकर्माणं तत्त्वमार्गाग्रदर्शनं स्वसुतं देवहूत्याः धातुः संस्मरति वचः।
तमासीनमकर्माणं तत्त्वमार्गाग्रदर्शनं स्वसुतं देवहूत्याः धातुः संस्मरति वचः।
देवहूतिरुवाच निर्विण्णा नितरां भूमन्, the double na in Sanskrit, we break it into in, next word starts with a, asad indriya tarshanat yena sambhavyamanena, prapannandham tamah prabho. Devahutiruvacha nirvinna nitaram bhuman asad indriya tarshanat yena sambhavyamanena prapannandham tamah prabho.
देवहूतिरुवाच निर्भिन्नानितरां भूमन् असदिन्द्रियदर्शनात् येन सम्भाव्यमानेन प्रपन्नान्धं तमः प्रभो।
देवहूतिरुवाच निर्भिन्नानितरां भूमन् असदिन्द्रियदर्शनात् येन सम्भाव्यमानेन प्रपन्नान्धं तमः प्रभो।
तस्य त्वं तमसोऽन्धस्य दुष्पारस्याद्य one word पारगं सच चक्षुर्जन्मनामन्ते लब्धं मे त्वदनुग्रहात्। तस्य त्वं तमसोऽन्धस्य दुष्पारस्याद्य पारगं सचक्षुर्जन्मनामन्ते लब्धं मे त्वदनुग्रहात्।
तस्य त्वं तमसोऽन्धस्य दुष्पारस्याद्यपारगं सच्चक्षुर्जन्मनामन्ते लब्धं मे त्वदनुग्रहात्।
तस्यं त्वं तमसोऽन्धस्य दुष्पारस्याध्यपारगं सच्चक्षुर्जन्मनामन्ते लब्धं मे त्वदनुग्रहात्।
य आद्यो भगवान् पुंसाम् इम् ईश्वरो वै भवान् किल लोकस्य तमसान्धस्य चक्षुःसूर्य इवोदितः। य आद्यो भगवान् पुंसाम् ईश्वरो वै भवान् किल लोकस्य तमसान्धस्य चक्षुःसूर्य इवोदितः।
य आद्यो भगवान् पुंसाम् ईश्वरो वै भवान् किल लोकस्य तमसान्धस्य चक्षुःसूर्य इवोदितः।
य आद्यो भगवान् पुंसाम् ईश्वरो वै भवान् किल लोकस्य तमसान्धस्य चक्षुःसूर्य इवोदितः।
अथ मे देव सम्मोहं ब्रेकिंग एट दैट मा इम अपाक्रष्टुं त्वमर्हसि the next one योवग्रहोऽहं one word योवग्रहोऽहं mametite tasmin. So you have to kind of say that whole word together, so put a plus there. योवग्रहोऽहं mametite tasmin yojitas tvaya. So it won't land exactly, but you have to say the line together. अथ मे देव सम्मोहम् अपाक्रष्टुं त्वमर्हसि योवग्रहोऽहं ममेतीते तस्मिन् योजितस्त्वया।
अथ मे देव सम्मोहम् अपाक्रष्टुं त्वमर्हसि योवग्रहोऽहं ममेति
तस्मिन्
योवग्रहोऽहं ममेतीत्येतस्मिन् योजितस्त्वया।
अथ मे देव सम्मोहम् अपाक्रष्टुं त्वमर्हसि योवग्रहोऽहं ममेतीत्येतस्मिन् योजितस्त्वया।
तं त्वा गताहं शरणं शरण्यं स्वभृत्य संसारतरोः कुठारं जिज्ञासयाहं प्रकृतेः पूरुषस्य नमामि सद्धर्मविदां वरिष्ठम्। तं त्वा गताहं शरणं शरण्यं स्वभृत्य संसारतरोः कुठारं जिज्ञासयाहं प्रकृतेः पूरुषस्य नमामि सद्धर्मविदां वरिष्ठम्।
तं त्वा गताहं शरणं शरण्यं स्वभृत्य संसारतरोः कुठारं जिज्ञासयाहं प्रकृतेः पूरुषस्य नमामि सद्धर्मविदां वरिष्ठम्।
तं त्वां गताहं शरणं शरण्यं स्वभृत्य संसारतरोः कुठारं जिज्ञासयाहं प्रकृतेः पूरुषस्य नमामि सद्धर्मविदां वरिष्ठम्।
मैत्रेयो उवाच इति स्वमातुर्निरवध्यम् ईप्सितं निशम्य पुंसाम् अपवर्गवर्धनम् Dhiyabhinandyatma, one word. Dhiyabhinandyatma vatam satam gatihi, visarga comma. Next on the bad ir goes away. Bhabhasha ishat smita shobhitananaha. Maitreyo vacha iti smamatur niravadhyamipsitam nishamya pumsam apavargavardhanam dhiyabhinandyatma vatam satam gatihi Bhabhasha ishat smita shobhitananaha.
मैत्रेय उवाच इति स्वमातुर्निरवध्यमीप्सितं निशम्य पुंसाम् अपवर्गवर्धनं धियाभिनन्द्यात्मवतां सतां गतिः बभाष ईषत् स्मितशोभिताननः
मैत्रेय उवाच इति स्वमातुर्निरवध्यमीप्सितं निशम्य पुंसाम् अपवर्गवर्धनं धियाभिनन्द्यात्मवतां सतां गतिः बभाष ईषत्स्मितशोभिताननः.
Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. So from here Kapila starts explaining that initial set like we discussed right now. Yoga Adhyatmikah Pumsam, Mato Nishreyasayame Atyanto Paratir Yatra, Dukkhasya Cha Sukhasya Cha. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Yoga Adhyatmikah Pumsam Mato Nishreyasayame Atyanto Paratir Yatra Dukkhasya Cha Sukhasya Cha.
श्रीभगवानुवाच योग आध्यात्मिकः पुंसां मतो निःश्रेयसाय मे अत्यन्तो परतिर्यत्र दुःखस्य च सुखस्य च
श्रीभगवानुवाच योग आध्यात्मिकः पुंसां मतो निःश्रेयसाय मे अत्यन्तो परतिर्यत्र दुःखस्य च सुखस्य च.
तमिमं ते प्रवक्ष्यामि यमवोचं पुराणघे ऋषीणां श्रोतु कामानां योगं सर्वांग नैपुणम्. तमिमं ते प्रवक्ष्यामि यमवोचं पुराणघे ऋषीणां श्रोतु कामानां योगं सर्वांग नैपुणम्.
अमिमं ते प्रवक्ष्यामि यमवोचं पुराणघे ऋषीणां श्रोतुकामानां योगं सर्वाङ्गनैपुणम्
तमिमं ते प्रवक्ष्यामि यमवोचं पुराणघे ऋषीणां श्रोतुकामानां योगं सर्वाङ्गनैपुणम्.
चेतः खल्वस्य बन्धाय मुक्तये चात्मनो मतं गुणेषु सक्तं बन्धाय रतं वा पुंसि मुक्तये. चेतः खल्वस्य बन्धाय मुक्तये चात्मनो मतं गुणेषु सक्तं बन्धाय रतं वा पुंसि मुक्तये.
चेतः खल्वस्य बन्धाय मुक्तये चात्मनो मतं गुणेषु सक्तं बन्धाय रतं वा पुंसि मुक्तये.
चेतः खल्वस्य बन्धाय मुक्तये चात्मनो मतं गुणेषु सक्तं बन्धाय रतं वा पुंसि मुक्तये.
Okay, we'll switch second round. Atay, you can be a student, and Vani Garu, you can be a student.
Okay.
15, okay. Aham mamabhimanotaihi, kama lobadibhir malaihi vitam yada manash shuddham, that im, adukkam asukam samam. So that becomes then adukkam asukam samam. Like I said, it's not about not trying to see how to be happy. It is about not worry about happiness and sorrow, right? So adukkam sukam, adukkam asukam samam, right? Both are equal. Aham mamabhimanotaihi kamalobhadibhir malaihi vitam yada manashuddham adukkam asukam samam.
अहं ममाभिमानोत्थैः कामलोभादिभिर्मलैः वीतं यदा मनः शुद्धम् अदुःखम् असुखं समम्
अहं ममाभिमानोत्तैः कामलोभादिभिर्मलैः वीतं यदा मनः शुद्धम् अदुःखमसुखं समम्
तदा पुरुष
Rajesh, one quick question. Adukkam means it's sukham only, right?
Adukkam, Sukham. Essentially, is meaning dukkam and sukham.
Oh, okay.
But on the chandaskaha, they might have just broken it.
Okay.
But also it's saying that lack of it also mean like no happiness and no sorrow are also equal. Think of it that way.
Because I thought adukkam means it's sukham. Okay.
It is. Adukkam is sukham, asukham is dukkam.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Tada purusha atmanam, kevalam prakrite param, nirantaram swayam jyotihi, visarga, the ra, we're going to break it, visarga, next we'll start with the a, animanam akhanditam. Tadha purusha atmanam kevalam prakrite param, nirantaram swayam jyotihi, animanam akhanditam.
तदा पुरुष आत्मानं केवलं प्रकृतेः परं निरन्तरं स्वयं ज्योतिः अणिमानमखण्डितम्
तदा पुरुष आत्मानं केवलं प्रकृतेः परं निरन्तरं स्वयं ज्योतिः अणिमानमखण्डितम्
ज्ञान वैराग्य युक्तेन भक्ति युक्तेन चात्मना paripashyatudhasinam. Paripashyati udhasinam, but combined together. So paripashyatudhasinam, prakritim cha hataujasam. Jnana vairagya yuktena bhakti yuktena chatmaha paripashyatudhasinam prakritim cha hataujasam.
ज्ञानवैराग्ययुक्तेन भक्तियुक्तेन चात्मना परिपश्यत्युदासीनं प्रकृतिं च हतौजसम्
ज्ञानवैराग्ययुक्तेन भक्तियुक्तेन चात्मना परिपश्यत् उदासीनं प्रकृतिं च हतौजसम्.
That second line, paripashyat yudasinam.
Udasi, all right. Paripashyat yudasinam prakritim cha hataujasam. Yeah.
Na yujya manaya bhaktya, bhagavat yakhilatmani sadrushosti shiva panta, yoginam brahma siddhaye. Na yujya manaya bhaktya bhagavat yakhilatmani sadrushosti shiva panta yoginam brahma siddhaye.
न युज्यमानया भक्त्या भगवत्यखिलात्मने यदृशोऽस्ति सदृशोऽस्ति शिवपन्था योगिनां ब्रह्मसिद्धये
न युज्यमानया भक्त्या भगवत्यखिलात्मनि सदृशोऽस्ति शिवः पन्था योगिनां ब्रह्मसिद्धये.
Prasangamajaram pasham, breaking at the ma, atmanah kavayo viduhu sa eva sadushu krito, moksha dwaram apavritam. So again, getting in touch with the sadhu, the door to liberation will open for you. Prasangamajaram pasham atmanah kavayo viduhu sa eva sadushu krito moksha dwaram apavritam.
प्रसङ्गमजरं पाशम् आत्मनः कवयो विदुः स एव साधुषु कृतो मोक्षद्वारमपावृतम्
प्रसङ्गमजरं पाशम् आत्मनः कवयो विदुः स एव साधुषु कृतो मोक्षद्वारमपावृतम्.
तितिक्षवः कारुणिकाः सुहृदस् सर्वदेहिनाम् अजात शत्रवश् शान्ताः साधवस् साधु भूषणाः. तितिक्षवः कारुणिकाः सुहृदः सर्वदेहिनाम् अजात शत्रवश् शान्ताः साधवः साधुभूषणाः
तितिक्षव कारुणिकाः सुहृदः सर्वदेहिनाम् अजातशत्रवः शान्ताः साधवः साधुभूषणाः
तितिक्षः कारुणिकाः सुहृदः सर्वदेहिनाम् अजातशत्रवः शान्ताः साधवः साधुभूषणाः
first word titikshava
तितिक्षवः कारुणिकाः
मय्यनन्येन भावेन भक्तिं कुर्वन्ति ये दृढां मत्कृते त्यक्त कर्माणः विसर्गा कॉमा instead of that is त्यक्त स्वजन बान्धवाः मह्यनन्येन भावेन भक्तिं कुर्वन्ति ये दृढां मत्कृते त्यक्त कर्माणः त्यक्त स्वजन बान्धवाः
मय्यनन्येन भावेन भक्तिं कुर्वन्ति ये दृढाम् मत्कृते त्यक्तकर्माणः त्यक्तस्वजनबान्धवाः
मय्यनन्येन भावेन भक्तिं कुर्वन्ति ये दृढां मत्कृते त्यक्तकर्माणः त्यक्तस्वजनबान्धवाः
मदाश्रयाः कथा मृष्टाः शृण्वन्ति कथयन्ति च तपन्ति विविधास्तापाः add a visargan comma naitan madgata chetasah. So it's going to, there are two more chapters devoted to bhakti, but in this Kapilopakyana, but here is just again just touching on that again of saying that the sadhus who are there are always kataha. He says you don't have to do too many complicated things. He's saying just shrinvanti, hearing, and kathayanti, and by chanting the kathas, the stories and the leelas, that itself is because he says that's what even the greatest of sadhus do, is because except that they spend all their time doing it, we spend 90 minutes a week attending the class and doing, that's the only difference that is there, right? But he says what you're doing is the right thing. He is just doing it consistently and doing it over a long period of time. मदाश्रयाः कथामृष्टाः शृण्वन्ति कथयन्ति च तपन्ति विविधास्तापाः नैतान् मद्गतचेतसः
मदाश्रया कथामृष्टाः शृण्वन्ति कथयन्ति च तपन्ति विविधास्तापाः नैतान् मद्गतचेतसः
मदाश्रयाः कथामृष्टाः शृण्वन्ति कथयन्ति च अपन्ति विविधास्तापाः नैतान् मद्गतचेतसः
त एते साधवस् साध्वी सर्वसङ्गविवर्जिताः सङ्गस्तेष्वत ते प्रार्थ्यः सङ्गदोषहराहिते. So again, he keeps using this word, like sangam, right? Like we say satsangam, right? Association. He says that's why it is so important, he says, because even if you don't want, you just happen to be in association with people, you'll gradually get moved into it. You'll gradually get attached to it. You don't have to know how it works, right? And says that's why the association with these people or the sadhus is extremely important, because for them that is the priority, right? And then you'll get pulled into it.
Rajesh, could you explain that second line one more time, how it is?
Which one?
The second line, Sangas Tveshada, where is the breaking?
Prarthya.
Sangas Teshwata te Prartyah, Sanga Doshaharahite.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Tahete Sadhavas Sadhvi Sarva Sanga Vivarjitaha Sangas Teshwata te Prartyah Sangadoषहराहिते.
तयेते साधवः साध्वी सर्वसङ्गविवर्जिताः सङ्गस्तेष्वथते प्रार्थ्यः सङ्गदोषहराहिते.
तयेते साधवः साध्वी सर्वसङ्गविवर्जिताः सङ्गस्तेष्वतते प्रार्थ्यः सङ्गदोषहराहिते.
सतां प्रसंगान् मम वीर्य संविदो भवन्ति हृत् कर्ण रसायनाः कथाः तच् Joshanat, I'm just breaking at the da there, Joshanat, Ashwapavarga Vartmani, easy to say it that way, Joshanat, Ashwapavarga Vartmani, comma, Shraddha, Ratir, Bhaktir, Anukramishyati. So again, this again goes to the core of that. He's saying by in the association, by hearing all those things that they are doing, he says naturally you will also get that bhakti. You will also naturally be put on the path of that. He says even if you don't want it, he says real devotion will come later. First, you got to get pulled into it even without knowing. Devotion will eventually follow, right? But at least get started by going into that path. Satam prasangan mama virya samvido bhavanti hritkarna rasayanah kataha tajjoshanat ashwapavargavartmani shraddha ratir bhaktir anukramishyati.
Satam prasangan mama virya samvido bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kathaha tajjoshanaadashvapavargavatmani shraddharatirбхактираनुक्रमिष्यति.
सतां प्रसङ्गान् मम वीर्यसंविदो भवन्ति हृत्कर्णरसायनाः कथाः तज्जोषणात् अश्वपवर्गवर्त्मनि अनुक्रममिष्यति. श्रद्धारतिर्भक्ति अनुक्रमिष्यति.
And then the second line, first part, tajjoshanat ashwa, a sound, ashwa power.
तज्जोषणात् आश्वपवर्गवर्त्मनि.
Bhaktya puman jata viraga aindriyad, comma, drishta shrutan madra chananuchintaya, anuchintaya, but word comes together, madra chananuchintaya, chittasya yato grahane yoga yukto, comma, yatishyate rijubhir yoga margaihi. Bhaktya puman jata viraga aindriyad drishta shrutan madrachana nuchintaya chittasya yatto grahane yoga yukto yatishyate rajubhir yoga margaihi.
Bhaktya puman jata viraga aindriyat drishta shrutan madrachananuchintaya chittasya yatto grahane yoga yukto yatishyate rujubhir yoga margaihi.
भक्त्या पुमान् जात विराग ऐन्द्रियात् दृष्टश्रुतान् मद्रचनानुचिन्तया चिन्तस्य यत्तो ग्रहणे योगयुक्तो यतिष्यते रुजुभिर्योगमार्गैः.
Second line, first word, chittasya.
चित्तस्य यत्तो.
I think you said it in by mistake, but yeah, chittasya.
Rajesh, one down. First line, it's Puman Jata Viraga. It's an in sound.
In sound there, yeah.
Okay.
It's the half of the nya, yeah.
Okay.
Asevayayam prakriter gunanam, comma, jnanena vairagya vijrumbhitena yogena mayyar pitaya cha bhaktya, comma, mam pratyagatmanam, breaking at that ma, pratyagatmanam ihavarundhe. Asevayayam prakriter gunanam jnanena vairagya vijrumbhitena yogena mayyar pitaya cha bhaktya mam pratyagatmanam ihavarundhe.
Asevayayam prakriter gunanam jnanena vairagya vijrumbhitena yogena mayyarpitaya cha bhaktya mam pratyagatmanamihavarundhe.
असेवयायं प्रकृतेर्गुणानां ज्ञानेन वैराग्य विजृम्भितेन योगेन मय्यर्पितया च भक्त्या मां प्रत्यगात्मनम् इह वरुन्धे.
Last word. Mam pratyagatmanam iha varundhe.
मां प्रत्यगात्मानम् इह वरुन्धे.
Devahutiru vacha kachit tvayuchita bhaktihi, comma, kidrishi mama gochara yaya padam te nirvanam im, comma, Anjasan Vashnava Aham. That word is one long word. Anjasan Vashnava. Devahutiruvacha Kachit Tvayuchita Bhaktihi Kidrushi Mama Gochara Yaya Padam Te Nirvanam Anjasan Vashnava Aham.
Devahutiruvacha Kachittvayuchita bhaktihi Kidrishi mama gochara Yaya padam te nirvanam Anjasan vashnava aham.
देवहूतिरुवाच काचित् त्वय्युचिता भक्तिः कीदृशी मम गोचरा यया पदन्ते निर्वाणम् अञ्जसान् वाष्णवा अहम्
Yo yogo bhagavad bhano, comma, nirvanat mams tvayoditah कीदृशः कति चांगानि, comma, यतस् तत्वाव बोधनम्. यो योगो भगवद्भानो निर्वाणात्मं स्वयोतितः कीदृशः कति चांगानि यतस्तत्त्वावबोधनम्.
Yo yogo bhagavat bano nirvanatmamstvayoditah Kidrishakati changani Yatastattvavabodhanam Yatatattvavabodhanam.
यो योगो भगवद्बाणो निर्वाणात्मंस्तयोदितः कीदृशः कति चाङ्गानि यतस्तत्त्वावबोधनम्.
Got it correct this time. यतस्तत्त्वाव. Okay.
यतस्तत्त्वावबोधनम्.
तदे तन्मे विजानीहि, comma, यथाहं मन्दधीर्हरे सुखं बुद्ध्येय दुर्बोधं, comma, योषा भवदनुग्रहात्. तथेतन्मे विजानीहि यताहं मन्दधीर्हरे सुखं बुद्ध्येय दुर्बोधं योषा भवदनुग्रहात्.
तदेतन्मे विजानीहि यथाहं मन्दधीर्हरे सुखं बुद्धेय दुर्बोधं योषा भवदनुग्रहात्.
तदेतन्मे विजानीहि यथाहं मन्दधीर्हरे सुखं बुद्धेय दुर्बोधं योषा भवदनुग्रहात्.
All right, we'll switch last round. Let me see who I had here. Aarti, you can be student, and Vasu can be student. Maitreyo vacha viditvartam kapilo maturitham, comma, jata sneho yatra tanvabhijatah tatvam nayam yat pravadanti sankyam, comma, provacha vai bhakti vitana yogam. Maitreyo vacha viditvartam kapilo maturitham jata sneho yatra tanvabhijatah tatvam nayam yat pravadanti sankyam provacha vai bhakti vitana yogam.
मैत्रेय उवाच विदित्वार्थं कपिलो मातुरित्थं जातस्नेहो यत्र तन्वाभिजातः तत्त्वां नायं यत् प्रवदन्ति साङ्ख्यं प्रोवाच वै भक्तिवितानयोगम्.
मैत्रेय उवाच विदित्वातं कपिलो मातुरित्तं जातस्नेहो यत्र तन्वाभिजातः तत्त्वां नायं यत् प्रवदन्ति साङ्ख्यं प्रोवाच वै भक्तिवितानयोगम्.
Shri Bhagavan Devanam Guna Linganam, breaking at that ma, im, comma, Anushravika Karmanam Sattva Evaika Manaso, comma, Brittis Swabhaviki Tuya. Shri Bhagavan Devanam Guna Linganam Anushravika Karmanam Sattva Evaika Manaso वृत्तिस्वाभाविकी तुया.
श्रीभगवानुवाच देवानां गुणलिङ्गानाम् आनुश्रविककर्मणां सत्त्व एवैकमनसो वृत्तिः स्वाभाविकी तुया।
श्रीभगवानुवाच देवानां गुणलिङ्गानाम् आनुश्रविक कर्मणां सत्त्व एवैकमा मनसो वृत्तिः स्वाभाविकी तुया करेक्टा சொன்னேனா
Yeah, correct, yeah. Animitta bhagavati, bhaktis siddher gariyasi jarayatyashu ya kosham, nigirnam, I'm just breaking at that ma, nigirnam analo yatha. Animitta bhagavati bhaktis siddher gariyasi jarayatyashu ya kosham nigirnam analo yatha.
अनिमित्ता भागवती भक्तिः सिद्धेर्गरीयसी जरयत्याशु या कोशं निकीर्णम् अनलो यथा।
अनिमित्ता भागवती भक्तिः सिद्धेर्गरीयसी जरयत्यासु या कोशं निघीर्णम् अनलो यथा।
Naikatmatham me sprihayanti kechit, that in that is there becomes a it there when you comma, kechit, comma, mat pada seva bhirata madihaha yenyoonyato bhagavatah prasajya, comma, sabhajayante mama paurushani. Naikatmatham me sprihayanti kechit मत्पादसेवाभिरता मदीहाः येन्योन्यतो भागवताः प्रसज्य सभाजयन्ते मम पौरुषाणि.
नैकात्मतां मे स्पृहयन्ति केचित् मत्पादसेवाभिरता मदीहाः येन्योन्यतो भागवताः प्रसज्य सभाजयन्ते मम पौरुषाणि.
नैकात्मनामं मे स्पृहयन्ति केचित् मत्पादसेवाभिरता मदीहाः येन्योन्यतो भागवताः प्रसज्य सभाजयन्ते मम पौरुषाणि.
And the first line, first word, naikatmatham.
Okay, naikatmatam me स्पृहयन्ति केचित्.
Rajesh, kechita, kechinna.
And the in வந்து becomes a it when you put a comma there.
Okay.
Okay, so you just, because you're stopping there, you put a it there. Pashyanti te me ruchiranyamba santaha, comma, prasanna bhaktraruna lochanani rupani divyani vara pradhani, all short is, comma, sakam vacham sprihaniyam vadanti. Pashyanti te me ruchiranyamba santaha prasanna bhaktrarunalochanani rupani divyani varapradhani sakam vacham sprihaniyam vadanti.
पश्यन्ति ते मे रुचिराण्यं वसन्तः प्रसन्नवक्त्रारुणलोचनानि रूपाणि दिव्यानि वरप्रदानि साकं वाचं स्पृहणीयां वदन्ति.
पश्यन्ति मे रुचिराण्यम्बसन्तः प्रसन्नवक्त्रारुण लोचनानि रूपाणि दिव्यानि वरप्रधानि साकं वाचं स्पृहणीयां वदन्ति.
Tair darshaniya vayavairudhara. That's a long word, you cannot break it. Tair darshaniya vayavairudhara, put a plus, vilasa hasekshita vama suktaihi hritatmano hrita pranamscha bhaktihi. The ra goes away, visarga comma bhaktihi. Next word starts with the a. Anichato me gatim anvim prayunkte.
இன்னும் வாட்டி சொல்லுங்களேன் இந்த ஃபர்ஸ்ட் லைன்.
Tair Darshaniya Vayavair Udara, if you want to break it. Tair Darshaniya Vayavair Udara plus Vilasa Hasekshita Vama Suktaihi.
Thank you.
Taidarshaniya Vayavairudara Vilasa Hasekshita Vama Suktaihi Hritatmano Hrita Pranamscha Bhakti Anichato me Gatimanvim Prayunte.
तैर्दर्शनीया वयवैरुदार विलासहासेक्षितवामसूक्तैः कृतात्मनो कृतप्राणांश्च भक्तिः अनिच्छतो मे गतिमन्वीं प्रयुङ्क्ते
दर्शनीय वयवैरुधार विलासहेसे हासेक्षितवाम सूक्तैः हृतात्मनो हृत प्रणा प्राणांश्च भक्तिः अनिश्चतो मे गतिम् अन्वीं प्रयुङ्क्ते.
Atho Vibhutim Mama Maya Vinastam, breaking at that ma Vinastam, comma Aishwaryam Ashtangam, each of that mas. Aishwaryam Ashtangam Anupravrutam Shriyam Bhagavatim Vasprihayanti Bhadram, comma Parasya Me Teshnuvate, Me and Teshnuvate, but easy to say together, Me Teshnuvate tu Loke. Atho vibhutim mama maya vinastam aishwaryamashtangamanu shriyam bhagavatim vasprihayanti bhadram parasya me teshnuvate tu loke.
अथो विभूतिं मम माया विनस्ताम् ऐश्वर्यमष्टाङ्गमनुप्रवृत्तं श्रियं भागवतीं वा स्पृहयन्ति भद्रां परस्य मे तेष्णुवते तु लोके.
अतो विभूतिं मम माया विनस्ताम् ऐश्वर्याम् अष्टाङ्ग अनुप्रवृत्तं श्रियं भागवतीं वा स्पृहयन्ति भद्रां परस्य मे तेष्णुवते तु लोके.
Correct. Me teshnuvate.
परस्य मे तेष्णुवते तु लोके.
Na karhichin mat parash shanta rupe, comma nangshyanti no me nimisho, that word comes together, me nimisho lady hetihi yeshamaham priya atma sutascha, comma sakha gurus suhrudo daivamishtam. न कर्हिचिन्मत्पराशान्तरूपे नङ्क्ष्यन्ति नो मे निमिषो लेडिहेतिः येषामहं प्रिय आत्मा सुतश्च सखा गुरुः सुहृदो दैवमिष्टम्.
न कर्हिचिन्मत्पराशान्तरूपे नङ्क्ष्यन्ति नो मे निमिषो लेढिहेतिः येषामहं प्रिय आत्मा सुतश्च सखा गुरुः सुहृदो दैवमिष्टम्.
न कर्हिचिन् मत्परः शान्तरूपे नाङ्क्ष्यान्ति नो मे निमिषो लेडिहेतिः येषामहं प्रिय आत्मा सुतश्च साखा गुरुः ओके साखा गुरु सुहृदो दैवम् इष्टं करेक्ट.
Yeah, that's correct. Then the first line is just after the comma, nangshyanti. I think you said na. You said it's just na. Nangshyanti.
Okay, nangshyanti no me nimisho lady hetihi.
Imam lokam tatai that ma, second ma, comma, atmanam ubhayayinam, atmanam anuye cheha, comma, ye rayaf pashavo grihaha. Imam lokam tatai atmanam ubhayayinam, atmanam anuye cheha, ye rayaf pashavo grihaha.
इमं लोकं तथैवामुम् आत्मानमुभयायिनम् आत्मानमनुये चेह ये रायः पशवो गृहाः
इमं लोकं तथैवामुम् आत्मानम् उभयायिनम् आत्मानम् अनुये चेह ये रायः पशवो गिराः
गृहा
गृहाः पशवो गृहाः
विसृज्य सर्वान् अन्यांश्च मामेवं विश्वतो मुखं भजन्त्यनन्यया one word भजन्त्यनन्यया भक्त्या तान् मृत्योर अतिपारये विसृज्य सर्वानन्यांश्च मामेवं विश्वतो मुखं भजन्त्यनन्यया भक्त्या तान् मृत्योर अतिपारये
विसृज्य सर्वान् अन्यांश्च मामेवं विश्वतो मुखं भजन्त्यनन्यया भक्त्या तान् मृत्योरतिपारये
विसृज्य सर्वान् अन्यांश्च मामेवं विश्वतो मुखं भजन्त्यनन्यया भक्त्या तान् मृत्योरतिपारये
नान्यत्र मद्भगवतः प्रधान पुरुषेश्वरात् आत्मनः सर्वभूतानां भयं तीव्रं निवर्तते नान्यत्र मद्भगवतः प्रधान पुरुषेश्वरात् आत्मनः सर्वभूतानां भयं तीव्रं निवर्तते
नान्यत्र मद्भगवतः प्रधानपुरुषेश्वरात् आत्मनः सर्वभूतानां भयं तीव्रं निवर्तते
यत्र मद्भगवतः प्रधानपुरुषेश्वरात् आत्मनः सर्वभूतानां भयं तीव्रं निवर्तते
मद्भयात् वाति वातोऽयं सूर्यस्तपति मद्भयात् वर्षतीन्द्रो दहत्यग्निः विसर्ग दहत्यग्निः नेक्स्ट द ir goes away मृत्युश्चरति मद्भयात् sorry question Visu मद्भयात् वाति वातोऽयं सूर्यस्तपति मद्भयात् वर्षतीन्द्रो दहत्यग्निः मृत्युश्चरति मद्भयात्
मद्भयात् वाति वातोऽयं सूर्यस्तपति मद्भयात् वर्षतीन्द्रो दहत्यग्निः मृत्युश्चरति मद्भयात्
मद्भयात् वाति वातोऽयं सूर्यस्तपति मद्भयात् वर्षतीन्द्रो दहत्यग्निः मृत्युश्चरति मद्भयात्
ज्ञान वैराग्य युक्तेन भक्ति योगेन योगिनः क्षेमाय पादमूलं मे प्रविशन्त्य कुतो भयम् one word प्रविशन्त्य कुतो भयम् ज्ञान वैराग्य युक्तेन भक्ति योगेन योगिनः क्षेमाय पादमूलं मे प्रविशन्त्य कुतो भयम्
ज्ञानवैराग्ययुक्तेन भक्तियोगेन योगिनः क्षेमाय पादमूलं मे प्रविशन्त्यकुतो भयम्
ज्ञानवैराग्ययुक्तेन भक्तियोगेन योगिनः क्षेमाय पादमूलं मे प्रविशन्त्य कुतो भयम्
एतावानेव लोकेऽस्मिन् पुंसां निःश्रेयसोदयः तीव्रेण भक्तियोगेन मनो मय्यर्पितं स्थिरम् एतावानेव लोकेऽस्मिन् पुंसां निःश्रेयसोदयः तीव्रेण भक्तियोगेन मनो मय्यर्पितं स्थिरम्
एतावानेव लोकेऽस्मिन् पुंसां निःश्रेयसोदयः तीव्रेण भक्तियोगेन मनोमय्यर्पितं स्थिरम्
एतावानेव लोकेऽस्मिन् पुंसां निःश्रेयसोऽडयः तीव्रेण भक्तियोगेन मनो मे यर्पितं स्थिरम्.
And the first line, last word, shodayah.
Oh, निःश्रेयसोऽधयः. Okay, shodayah. Okay.
इति श्रीमद् भागवते महापुराणे पारमहंस्यां संहितायां तृतीयस्कन्धे कापिलेयोपाख्याने पञ्चविंशोऽध्यायः.
इति श्रीमद्भागवते महापुराणे पारमहंस्यां संहितायां तृतीयस्कन्धे कापिलेयोपाख्याने पञ्चविंशोऽध्यायः
श्रीमद्भागवते महापुराणे पारमहंस्यां संहितायां तृतीयस्कन्धे कापिलेयोपाख्याने पञ्चविंशोऽध्यायः.
4 minutes left. We'll quickly get through the remaining meaning of this chapter and finish it off today. So we kind of saw till where Devahutiru Vacha was coming there. So Kapila is talking about the association with people, right? That is the most important thing he says. For bhakti, you should be associated with those people. And so Devahuti then asks more questions. Tell me more about this. What are the different paths? Because we talked about devotion or bhakti is important, but she asked, what is bhakti? What do you mean? How do you define what bhakti is? And what are the ways of executing those bhakti, right? So multiple she's breaking that apart and saying, just by saying bhakti, you cannot, mean anything here. And she says, Yadaham Manda, she says, I am little bit, slow to understand, she says. So please, tell me in very simple terms so I can understand what it is, right? So here is kind of continuing, Kapila Muni is continuing here. So like he said, he again talks about, he says that our soul, when we now are there, it's not just what we are seeing from our environment. We have a lot of things which we have gotten from a lot of the previous births, right? We have our impressions from previous births. We have the habits from this birth. We have the desires which are getting accumulated depending on your environment and all of these things. He says to get rid of all of these things, he says it's extremely difficult. It says it requires a lot of hard work, self-discipline, because you've been conditioned for so many years to be able to think in a particular way, right? So he says the path of self-realization of Jnana Margam is you have to somehow think and control your mind to get away from this, which is extremely hard. So Kapila says, but don't worry about it. He says pure devotion to God, right? He says pure bhakti. He says when you engage in such a way, it says it burns away all of these accumulated things without your knowledge, just like how when you put whatever you eat into your stomach, there is a fire burning in your stomach, that Agni which is there burns away whatever you eat. Similarly, he says all of these past impressions and everything habits you have will get burnt if you have true devotion, right? Now, that is what the difference is, right? Devotion versus true devotion. Now, the true devotee, he says, is not somebody who's, this is his definition of true devotee. He says true devotee is not somebody who says, I want to go merge with Bhagavan. He says, because the moment you say, I want something, that means it becomes conditional. And he says, even saying, I want to merge with Bhagavan becomes a conditional devotion, right? He says, a true devotee is one who says, I don't want anything. I don't even want to merge with Bhagavan. I don't care about it, right? I don't care what the outcome is, right? He says, I just have bhakti. I just have devotion. I just love that Bhagavan, whichever God it is. And by looking at his smiling face and looking at the form, I'm just in love, right? With that Bhagavan, I'm just in devotion and not want anything, right? And then he goes on to say that essentially don't worry about the destination. He says, and he goes on to describe a true devotee is one who does not want the Ashtasiddhis, right? He does not want the Devaloka. He doesn't want any of these other benefits and desires. The one who's just doing bhakti and getting devotion is a true devotee. That is his definition of true devotee. And then I remembered one thing that Bhattacharya said in Dashakam 95. You can go look at it. The last stanza of Dashakam 95. He says, by intensifying that bhakti in you, O Krishna, all these Ashtasiddhis will come fighting for me. Will say, I want to give you Ashtasiddhi, I want to give you this Swarga Lokam, I want to give you this Lokam. He says, but in Vilambavaham Nadriye Kamayeham Twame Anandapuram, he says, I am going to say reject all of those things. He says, I don't want anything. All I want is Twame Ananda Puram. I just want pure love and devotion to you. He says that is the true devotee that even Kapila is saying. He's the one who by doing that rejects everything and just want that. He's the greatest devotee. And if you become that devotee, all your past impressions and karmas and everything that you have accumulated will just get burnt, right? So that kind of is coming to the end, and there is a few stanzas at the end which I'll tell next one. Shri Hare Namaha, Shri Hare Namaha, Shri Hare Namaha. Gopika Jeevana Smaranam Govinda Govinda. Sadgurunath Maharaj Ki Jai. Kahena vacha manasendriyerva buddhyatmana va prakrute swabhavat karomi yatyat sakalam parasmai narayanaiti samarpayami. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Rajesh.
Bye.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Rajesh.
Bye, everyone.